Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. Please switch off or make silent your mobile phones and all other devices, and keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. When invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. Before we move on to the agenda, I've been notified that item number 12 concerning the future partnering arrangements in relation to Newcastle International Airport has been withdrawn. So move on to item 1, public questions. There are no questions for today's meeting. Item 2, can I have a mover and a seconder please to the minutes of the meeting on the 12th of February?
Thank you, Chair. Move those minutes.
Thank you. Seconder?
Thank you, Chair. Second those.
Thank you. Can we agree the minutes are a correct record? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm the minutes have been agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members this morning, please? No. With that, we'll move on to item 4, which is the County Durham Plan Annual Monitoring Report and Proposed Review. Can I invite Alan Patrickson, Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval to start the preparation of a new local plan for County Durham, and the report also seeks approval for the 23-24 annual monitoring report of the existing County Durham Plan and to agree its publication. The County Durham Plan was adopted in October 2020 and will be 5 years old this year. There's a requirement in the National Planning Policy Framework to review local plans every 5 years, meaning that the plan is due for review in October of 2025. If it's not reviewed, it will be considered out of date and therefore hold less weight. Since its adoption, there have been significant changes to both the local national planning context, notably that the government has now issued a revised target that would increase the Council's current annual housing requirement of 1,308 to 2,011. This figure will apply once the plan is 5 years old and mean that the Council will no longer be able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. At that point, all policies in the County Durham Plan relating to housing would be considered out of date, which would make it much more difficult to properly plan for developments and for housing schemes, especially if these were of poor quality or that the Council considered were in the wrong place, and likely therefore to lead to increased numbers of planning appeals. Other notable changes include the approach to Greenbelt, which adds the new category of Grey Belt, which is land in the Greenbelt that is either brownfield or makes a limited contribution to purposes of to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas or to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one and another. The last government consulted on changes to the plan-making process, which will have implications for any review of the County Durham Plan, and it's the current government's intention to implement the new plan-making system from summer of 2025. This will provide important context within which the new plan needs to be prepared. The government has set out that it expects the new local plans to be prepared in a 30-month period, so a start date of September 2025 would therefore see adoption of the new plan in 2028. This process will include 2 public consultations, both of which are mandatory. An assessment has identified that a budget of around £700,000 will be required, and this includes preparing an evidence base, external legal support and the cost of an examination in public. As well as the finance, there will be a requirement for internal support from teams across the Council, particularly the legal team and other corporate services. In terms of the annual monitoring report, the Council are required by national planning policy regulations to produce an annual monitoring report for the County Durham Plan. A key element of this is assessing the extent to which the planning policies set out in the current plan are performing and have been delivered. With the County Durham Plan now over 4 years old, the annual monitoring report provides analysis and trends that will inform the new County Durham Plan. Chair, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 14 of the report.
Thanks, Alan. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. And can I just say big thanks to staff who've been involved and will continue to be involved in this process, because it's a lot of work goes into the County Durham Plan. The County Durham Plan has provided the local planning framework for the county since it was adopted in October 2020. While the plan has served well, time has moved on, and with the new National Planning Policy Framework and the increased housing targets, it's critical that we respond. A new plan is essential to keep our county fit for the future by delivering the kind of development that we need, and crucially in the right locations. The annual monitoring report presented here today provides important context for the new plan and will be central to informing its policies. I am also pleased to see that the plan continues to take us in the right direction in areas of housing supply, economic development and vitality of our town centres, all of which bring their own challenges, while also flexing to ensure that the right level of protection and conservation are provided to our natural environment and historic built heritage. I'm happy, therefore, to propose the recommendations in paragraph 14 of the report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Can I invite Councillor James Rowlandson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Resources, Investments and Assets, to second the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The need for an up-to-date County Durham plan is a key priority in order that we provide the right planning framework to deliver the new homes and the supporting infrastructure that our communities need. The context for development is changing, and new targets will shape how proposals in our county come forward. So a fit-for-purpose plan, future-proofed as much as it can be, is essential to allow us the right level of control and encouragement. Considerable time and resources will be needed to go into the development of the plan. It is a considerable task, and I'd like to acknowledge the time and effort and skill of our officers who will be taking this on. I'm happy to second the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Is anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. Yesterday, coincidentally, the government published its planning and infrastructure bill, which will update the planning system with a view to expedite building. And I'll just read a comment from Councillor Adam Hugg, who's the housing and planning spokesman for the LGA, who said there remain concerns about how it will ensure that councils, who know their areas best and what they need, remain at the heart of the planning process. The democratic role of councillors in decision making is the backbone of the English planning system, and this should not be diminished. Councils approve 9 out of 10 planning applications that come before them. The bill has been warmly welcomed by developers, and there's a reason for that, in that it greatly reduces the ability of councils and councillors to regulate planning, and I have a deep sense of foreboding about where these changes are taking us. It is therefore vital that we have a new County Durham plan to facilitate appropriate development and safeguard our residents from inappropriate development as far as possible. And those are the operative words, as far as possible. But the County Durham plan is not just about housing. It's also important for the council to do what it can to keep our town centres vibrant, which the council is doing with some success. I note, for instance, at paragraph 68 that CM continues to have the lowest vacancy rate in the county at 7.2%. That's half the national average. And of course, employment land is another key area which we will continue to manage carefully and try to enable going forward. I therefore warmly welcome the report, Chair, and the recommendations, and wholeheartedly agree the need to expedite a new County Durham plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. The government's changes to housing targets which have been imposed on counties across the country are putting at risk the protection of greenbelt and farmland. It's therefore essential that the County Durham plan is updated. We've already added significant improvements to the County Durham plan through supplementary planning documents, including on parking and solar energy, and will shortly adopt similar improvements for energy efficiency, renewables and biodiversity. It's essential that the public join in the consultation on the County Durham plan revision, and that we do all we can to protect those important open spaces and landscapes that could be damaged by Labour's latest planning nightmare. When Labour ran this council, they made a massive mess of planning, and now in government, as Councillor Bell says, they're trying to rip up councillors' and residents' democratic right to challenge planning applications. This review is essential as is public involvement in the process. I support the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Is anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 5, it's one of Paul's, so it's got a long title. Forecast of Revenue and Capital Outturn 2024-25, period to the 31st of December 2024, and update on progress towards achieving MTFP 14 savings. If I can invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This report once again flags the continuing impact of inflationary and demand-driven pressures on our budgets, particularly in our children looked after placement budgets and in our special educational needs budgets. The report identifies that adult and health services, the Chief Exec's Department and resources are all forecasting cash limit underspends to the year end, but that neighbourhoods and climate change and regeneration, economy and growth and children and young people services are forecasting cash limit overspends to the year end. The most significant overspend relates to children and young people services, where our looked after children costs in particular are contributing to a forecast £13 million cash limit overspend, around £3.5 million higher than what was forecast at Q2. Details of the cash limit forecast for each service group are set out in detail in the report at sections 55 to 89, and at section 43 and 51 in the report, we set out details of the costs that have been treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately funded from our contingencies budget. The forecast cash limit and general reserves position is set out at paragraph 53 in the report, where the cash limit reserves at the 31st of March are forecast to be just under 10.3 million, and the general reserve is forecast to be just over 23.3 million. The general reserve position is around £3.4 million lower than it was previously forecast at Q2, and this is largely as a result of the deterioration in the CYPS forecast overspend this year, but partially offset by receipt of additional government funding from the business rate levy surplus that has been distributed and was announced as part of the final local government finance settlement. The forecast general reserve is £4.9 million below the minimum threshold we should hold based on the reserves policy agreed by Council when we set the 24-25 budget last year. As part of the final accounts close down, we'll have to undertake a review of all of our reserves to find the capacity to make a further transfer into the general reserve to increase this by another £3 million on top of the 4.9 to ensure we enter into 25-26 with an opening balance in line with the reserves policy agreed by Council last month. Corporate costs are forecast to be around £123,000 under budget, which is broadly in line with the Q2 forecasts, and we're reporting a £4.9 million underspend in the central capital financing budgets, offset by £131,000 underachievement of investment income from investment in our surplus cash balances, and £169,000 underspend against the central contingencies budget in year. These Treasury management underspends in particular are a managed position in terms of delaying borrowing and are creating the headroom to partially offset the corporate overspend that will have to be picked up for children and young people services. Appendix 4 to the report, as usual, contains details of all the earmarked reserves and balances of the Council, and these are split between sums held corporately, grants and sums held on behalf of third parties, and sums held by services for specific purposes. If we exclude our schools, our earmarked reserves, including cash limit reserves, are forecast to reduce by around £10 million in year to £166.2 million at the 31st of March 25. The updated forecasts are that the reduction in reserves will be around £2.8 million higher than what was forecast in Q2. Paragraphs 97 to 101 of the report provide a summary of this position. Members will note that £19.6 million of the £166 million of earmarked reserves relates to grant and sums held on behalf of third parties. I'd also note that this position is before we transfer sums to the general reserve at the year end, the current forecast being around £7.9 million of earmarked reserves needing to be transferred to the general reserve at year end, and before we apply £3.5 million to balance in the budgets in 25-26. The dedicated schools grant position is covered in the report at sections 104 to 129, which provides details of the forecast outturn against the dedicated schools grant, including the high needs SEND allocations, our schools block, the early years block and the central block. The updated forecast for our maintained schools shows an improvement on the Q2 forecasts, and whilst our maintained schools are still forecasting to have to draw 1.8 million of their retained balances to balance their expenditure this year, this is about £1 million less than what was forecast at Q2, and a significant improvement on the £4.5 million drawn balances that was anticipated when the budgets were initially set. This is the overall position, and within this there are schools that are overspending in year and a number of schools that are underspending. The updated forecast for our high needs DSG expenditure, which is also subject to a separate report on today's agenda, shows a forecast £13.2 million overspend in year, which compares to a forecast £11.6 million overspend forecast at Q2. The main cost drivers remain top-up payments to schools to retain children with SEND in mainstream provision, plus the costs of alternative provision, with costs escalating much faster than the grant uplift that was received in 24-25. The in-year deficit will result in a doubling of the Council's cumulative deficit, which is forecast to be £23.9 million at the 31st of March, and the report exemplifies the impact of financing this deficit in terms of the general fund and the risk that exists in terms of the statutory accounting override, which is due to end at the end of 25-26. The report includes details of the forecast capital programme outturn from paragraph 130 onwards, including details of revisions to the capital programme to reflect reprofiling and slippage to future years, as well as the receipt of grant and other adjustments. Set out at sections 132 to 138 are details of a capital programme review that has been undertaken to identify areas where capital commitments can be revisited, schemes paused or cancelled or deferred, in order to create some additional capital contingencies. This additional contingency will be needed given the scale and complexity and the inherent risks in some of the schemes that are already underway. Details of the proposed adjustments, which will require Cabinet approval, are set out at paragraphs 138. Additions to the capital programme are set out at paragraph 139. These adjustments build on the amendments agreed by Cabinet in February. Members will see that the total capital expenditure forecast for the current year is £289.5 million, and at the 31st of December last year we'd spent £179.4 million of capital expenditure. Details of how the capital programme is being financed are set out at paragraph 142. Members will see at paragraphs 144 to 152 details of performance against the various prudential indicators agreed by Council last year when the 24-25 budget was set. In terms of the collection fund, the report includes details of the updated forecast outturn position for both the council tax and the business rates collection funds. These are set out from paragraph 153 onwards. The net position across both funds after the receipt of section 31 grant is included for the county council is set out at paragraph 179, and this shows a net surplus of £3.3 million at the year end, which is in line with the forecast at Q2. Finally, Chair, at paragraphs 176 onwards, there is a summary of the progress achieved in terms of delivering the £8 million of savings factored into the 24-25 budget, and this shows that at the 31st of December, 81.8% of the savings that were factored into the budget had been delivered, though it is forecast that £1.2 million of savings, representing 14.4% of the overall savings total, will not be delivered in 24-25, which has contributed to the cash limit overspending in regeneration, economy and growth, and in neighbourhoods and climate change. Details of the under-delivered savings are set out at paragraph 179 in the report. There is an update at paragraphs 180 onwards in terms of the HR implications from voluntary, compulsory and early retirements in year and the overall position since 2011. Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 32. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader of the Council and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to move the report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I thank the officers for this very comprehensive and thorough report, and budget managers right across the Council for their continued focus on managing their areas. There is some good news. It's pleasing to note that there are some cash limit underspends forecast in Adult and Health Services, Resources and the Chief Executive's Office, totalling 3.7 million, which offset the relatively small overspends forecast in Regen and Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, totalling 385,000. The net underspend being around 3.3 million to year end in these services. Unfortunately, it's all downhill after that. The cost pressures we are experiencing at this time are huge with the ever-escalating demand for children's social care and the complexity of needs of some of those children's in particular. The CYPS services forecast overspend has risen from 9.5 million at Q2 to 13.1 million now, and within this there are higher overspends forecast in our looked after children budget, where the placements budget is forecast to overspend by £10.4 million now, 3.1 million more than was forecast at Q2. The overspend in the children looked after placement budgets this year is after we have invested an additional 15 million into the budget in the current year. It is staggering how demand and costs in this area of our budget continue to escalate. It's why we have had to find a further 16.6 million of budget growth next year too, as part of the 25-26 budget we agreed last month, which will take the children and care placement budget to an eye-watering 93.2 million in 25-26. That's a 285% increase over the last 7 years. The net cash limit overspend for all services is now forecast to be nearly 9.7 million this year, 2.3 million higher than the forecast at Q2, when there was a net cash limit overspend of 7.4 million forecast. The 13.1 million cash limit overspend in CYPS will need to be met corporately from the General Reserve. The forecasts include a one-off 1.1 million credit of a levy account surplus grant distribution from the government, which was not factored into the budgets or previous forecasts. Moving on to reserves, the Q3 forecast will result in the general reserve position reducing by 8.7 million to 23.3, which is significantly below the minimum threshold we agreed as part of the reserves policy, which aims to keep the general reserve between 5 and 7.5% of the net council budget requirement. A transfer from the MTFP support reserve of 4.9 million will therefore be required to replenish the minimum requirement levels should these forecasts materialise, that transfer being 3.4 million more than what was forecast at Q2. A further top-up of nearly 3 million will be required at the start of 25-26 to reflect the uplifted net budget requirement for 25-26 and the need, therefore, to have an opening general reserve position of 31.1 million in 25-26. Excluding schools balances, based on these forecasts, our earmarked reserves are now forecast to fall by 10.1 million this year to 166.2. That's around 2.7 million less than what was forecast at Q2. In overall terms, the total general earmarked and cash limit reserves, excluding schools, at 31st of March 25 are forecast to be 189.5 million, an in-year reduction of 18.9 million in total. The forecast cash limit general reserves and earmarked reserves position for the Council, although forecast all to reduce by the year end, still demonstrate strong financial resilience. I would also highlight that the 19.6 million of the 166.2 of earmarked reserves we hold are held on behalf of others, and that 3.5 million of the MTFP support reserve is being drawn on next year to balance the budget. In terms of the collection fund forecast, it's pleasing to note that there is in-year and cumulative surplus on the council tax collection fund and on the business rates collection fund, taking into account the Section 31 grant we will receive for the various business rate reliefs that we've administered during the year. The net position across the two collection funds is a forecast surplus of 5.4 million, of which the council's share is 3.3, which is broadly in line with the Q2 forecast. The amended capital programme, taking into account reprofile and new grants and contributions secured since we considered the issue at Q2, plus the review of the capital programme to create some additional headroom and contingency provision, results in a revised 24-25 capital programme of around 289.5 million this year, with around 179.4 of capital expenditure having occurred by the 31st of December. Cabinet have had to make some difficult choices when it comes to capital investments and have needed to balance the risks and pressures inherent in the capital programme. I fully support the amendments made to the capital budget as outlined in the papers and note the good performance against the various prudential indicators agreed by Council in February 24 and the delivery of significant investment to 31st of December, where capital spending to the end of Q3 exceeded the position to the same point last year, which was itself a record year in terms of delivering capital investment. We are on course again to exceed last year's total capital investment this year. And congratulations are in order to all those people managing projects and getting them executed on time and on budget. As for our dedicated schools grant position, like the Council, our maintained schools are facing unavoidable inflationary pressures. The updated forecasts now factor in the additional grants schools are receiving to help them meet the costs of the Teachers' Pay Award and the additional targeted and top-up funding they'll receive to help meeting the costs of children with special educational needs. Overall, our maintained schools are now forecasting a reduced call on their reserves to help balance their budgets. The draw on the schools' reserves now being only 1.8 million this year, 2.6 million better than the initial planned use of reserves, which was assumed for budget setting purposes, and £2.9 million better on the Q2 forecasts. Disappointingly, but not unexpectedly, there's been a deterioration in the forecast overspend against our high needs DSG funding to year end, with the updated forecast indicating an in-year overspend of £13.2 million. A deterioration on the Q2 forecasts where an £11.5 million overspend was forecast. The cumulative deficit to 31st of March 25 is now forecast to be £23.9 million, a doubling of the deficit in year and largely due to the reduced uplift in the high needs DSG funding in year. We'll consider later in the Cabinet agenda today a detailed report on the latest DSG forecasts, which is something the Government simply must tackle through legislation and additional funding, including writing off the accumulated deficits, which are frankly becoming unsustainable and are now impacting on the council taxpayer through lost interest to service them. If it were not for this deficit that we are holding, the council's general fund would be £1 million better off this year and next year, because servicing the deficit will cost the council taxpayer £1.5 million in lost interest. In terms of delivery of MTFP savings, at the halfway point of the year, officers have delivered around 82% of the £8 million of savings requirements for the year. There's around £1 million of savings we agreed last year, however, largely linked to income-related savings in neighbourhoods and climate change and regen that have not been delivered and are producing in-year overspends. Details of these are set out in the report, and I know that the relevant corporate directors are implementing appropriate mitigations to ensure that these overspends do not impact into 25-26 and beyond. In summary, the report identifies a range of budget pressures that are largely outside of our control that are placing huge pressures on council budgets. Through a combination of prudent financial management and one-off savings in our capital financing budgets and receipt of the levy account grant, we have been able to mitigate some of these pressures in year, though not entirely, and we will have to undertake a review of reserves at year end to ensure we maintain a general reserve in line with the policy agreed by Council. And with that, Chair, I move the recommendations set out in the report at paragraph 32.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Bell, to Paul and his team for this detailed report, and to all the budget managers across the Council for their continued effective management of their budgets, which in an authority of this scale and complexity such as ours is challenging, but managing our finances is a key issue for us all. Our robust financial management of this Council has consistently been recognised as value for money assessments from our external auditors, and was also recognised in the SIPFA in the peer review last year. Despite the significant growth we built into the current year's budget, the overspend in children and young people's services has increased again from Q2 to a forecast £13 million overspend this year, which we will need, as has been said, to be picked up corporately at the year end. We will need to rebalance the general reserve at year-end based on these forecasts to ensure we maintain compliance with the reserves policy that Council has agreed. Many of the inflationary and demand pressures in this report will continue into next year and were factored into the 2025-26 budget report agreed last month. The challenges we face in balancing our budget going forward is significant, but we remain in a relatively strong position and are well placed to meet these challenges, though we must all accept that the impact of many years of reduced funding and unfunded budget pressures is placing a huge strain on the public finances and has reduced our financial resilience and that of the wider sector. Of course, many of the pressures we face are also faced by our schools, both maintained and academies, with the report identifying an improved position in terms of our maintained schools budgets and their retained balances compared to their original budgets. That said, our 135 maintained schools are still forecasting to draw a net 1.84 million from their reserves this year, reducing their retained balances in year. It is pleasing to note that to the 31st of December we have delivered £179 million of capital investment, with the updated and amended capital programme being £289.5 million of forecast expenditure. I fully expect that capital investment this year will be in excess of the £233 million that was invested last year, which was by far and away the largest level of capital investment in a single year that this council has ever delivered. Another record-breaking year in terms of delivery. This administration will continue to deliver action rather than just talk about it. With that, I am happy to second this recommendation as set out in the report at paragraph 32, including the amendments to the capital programme as outlined in the report. Is there anyone else wishes to speak to the report, please? No? Can we agree the report and its recommendations? Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 6, the annual review of the Constitution. Can I invite Helen Bradley, Director of Legal and Democratic Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This report follows a similar format to previous annual reviews of the Constitution, and it firstly sets out the legislative requirements for a Constitution, as well as the approach that we've taken in undertaking the review. The proposed changes are appended as tracked change documents, and there's a summary of all of the changes in a table appended at Appendix 20. The proposed changes include those necessary to give effect to the outcome of the Local Government Boundary Commission review, which will take effect from May 2025. With the reduction in the number of councillors, it's proposed to reduce the number of seats on the committees by 22%. Those proposals will be presented as a separate report to Council on the 19th of March. We're proposing a minor amendment to Article 5 of the Constitution in relation to the election of the leader, which takes place at the annual meeting following the election. That paragraph currently includes a date of 2021, but we're proposing to remove the date completely to future-proof that provision. The report sets out proposed changes to the overview and scrutiny arrangements. Firstly, within the terms of reference, to make specific reference to company governance arrangements, and summarises a workshop that was held at the end of January to consider the number and themes for scrutiny, which we are proposing remain unchanged. It's also proposed to adopt an executive and scrutiny protocol to ensure that the Council's arrangements reflect best practice as set out in the statutory guidance published in April last year. Paragraph 22 of the report refers to a report that was to be considered by Constitution Working Group on the 6th of March, which was after the agenda for this meeting was published, and that was to consider whether or not the appointment of chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny would be appointed based on political balance, and the group agreed that they should be, and therefore accordingly that proposal will be concluded within the report that's presented to Council next week. There's a minor amendment proposed to the terms of reference to Audit Committee, again to make explicit reference to company governance arrangements. In terms of the Officer Scheme of Delegations, the majority of proposed amendments are intended to reflect structural changes following staffing changes. We're only proposing to amend to reflect permanent changes rather than any temporary realignments that are in place. There are a number of clarifications, however, to draw Cabinet's attention to. Firstly, with the Head of Planning and Housing, it's proposed to include applications of strategic significance alongside those to be determined by committee rather than under officer delegations. Looking to make it clear that the Head of Planning and Housing's delegations in relation to land extend only in relation to council housing and Gypsy Roma traveller sites, with the other powers in relation to land resting with the Head of Corporate Property and Land. And finally, we're looking to make it clear that requests for call-in may be withdrawn and that objections to planning applications need to be on material planning grounds. In relation to the Corporate Director of Resources delegations, we're proposing to include specific reference to insurance arrangements under the administration of Council's financial affairs, and also looking to ensure that the provisions in relation to redeployment reflect the Council's policy, and that's to include reference of fixed-term employees with a minimum of 2 years continuous service and casual employees with a regular work pattern. There are also proposed changes associated with proposed changes to the financial procedure rules and financial management standards referred to later on in the report. With regard to the rules of procedure, there are proposed amendments to the Council procedure rules in relation to the rules of debate, time limits for speaking during the budget debate, and also petitions. There are updates to the budget and policy framework to remove out-of-date legislative references, and those changes to the financial procedure rules that I've just referenced are to end current cash limit reserve arrangements and introduce more corporate and centralised oversight and approval of transfers to and from service grouping earmarked reserves. The contract procedure rules have been updated to reflect the introduction of the Procurement Act 2023. And finally, on procedure rules, it's proposed to clarify within the officer employment rules that the monitoring officer is a chief officer, and to clarify that any disciplinary action against chief officers will be dealt with in accordance with JNC procedures. The final section of the Constitution relates to code and protocols, and there are a number of proposed changes within that. Firstly, for the Code of Conduct of Members, there are minor amendments to reflect that we now have one procedure for dealing with complaints and hearings instead of two, and we're also proposing to update the wording for the Leadership Nolan Principle, which was updated by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. With regard to the Employee Code of Values and Behaviours, that's recently been reviewed alongside the Best Value Standards and the Corporate Peer Challenge requirements, and it's proposed to make explicit reference to the Nolan Principles so that it aligns with the Member Code of Conduct. There's also a proposed change in relation to officer gifts and hospitality, in that gifts other than token gifts, such as mugs and stationery, etc., should not be accepted. Any gifts other than token gifts should be donated to the Chair's charity or politely declined, and that will hopefully make it easier for officers to determine whether or not gifts should be accepted. The protocol on member-officer relations has been reviewed to take account of feedback from officers and members since May 2021 and seeks to clarify how members can raise different types of queries and seeks to clarify the distinct roles between officers and members. We're also proposing to include a protocol on members interacting with third parties, which provides guidance to members on how to respond to different types of meeting requests and when it's appropriate for them to be accompanied by officers. And finally, the review of our company governance arrangements identified that as part of best practice, our constitution should include an up-to-date policy and procedure to manage actual and potential conflicts. So it's therefore proposed to include the officer guidance on conflicts of interest, which is appended at Appendix 19. Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph to the report and obviously include those proposed changes to the appointment of chairs and vice chairs for overview and scrutiny committees.
Thanks, Helen. The Council's constitution sets out how the Council operates, how decisions are made and how the procedures which are followed to ensure that these are efficient, transparent and accountable to local people. Some of these processes are required by law, while others are a matter for the Council to choose. It is good practice to review the constitution regularly to ensure that it remains fit for purpose and reflects good practice and legislation. The report summarises the work that has been done throughout the year in reviewing all aspects of the Constitution. The majority of the proposed changes this year are to take account of changes in the Council's governance arrangements following the Local Government Boundary Commission review and to prepare for the new electoral term in May 2025. The proposed changes to the officer scheme of delegation in respect of executive functions are minimal, but essential to ensuring that council business can be conducted efficiently and effectively. The proposed changes to terms of reference and rules of procedure and codes of practice are matters for the council to determine. However, the proposals will ensure that the council's governance arrangements are fit for purpose, reflect up-to-date legislation and best practice. Where appropriate, the proposals have been informed by feedback received from members and officers. As in previous years, Constitution Working Group have been consulted on the proposed changes. The group asked officers to consider further changes, including the proposal that the appointment of chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny committees should be on the basis of political balance. It is beneficial to have cross-party input to the annual review, and I am pleased that Constitution Working Group was supportive of all the changes proposed. In moving the recommendations set out at paragraph 4 in the report, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Monitoring Officer and her team for undertaking this year's review, and to all the officers across the Council who have contributed. Can I invite Councillor Bell to second the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. I would echo your comments about the importance of keeping the Constitution under review, and with that I'm happy to second the report and recommendations.
Thanks, Richard. Is anyone else wishing to speak on the report? Okay, can we agree the report and the recommendations? Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 7 is the High Needs Block Funding for SEND and Inclusion Support. Can I invite John Pearce, Corporate Director of Children and Young People Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, following on from item 5, the purpose of this report is to update Cabinet on the latest financial forecasts for the High Needs Block of the Dedicated Schools Grant. The High Needs Block budget provides funding for children with special educational needs and disabilities, as well as inclusion support services across our education system. It is ring-fenced within the Dedicated Schools Grant, and there's a set of grant conditions that set out what it can and can't be spent on. As is the case for all councils nationally, there are substantial pressures on the High Needs Block in Durham due to significant increases in the numbers of children needing support due to their special educational needs. It's recognised that national reform is required to establish a sustainable system that is able to meet the needs of children and young people. Paragraph 35 in the report lists a number of recent national reports highlighting the challenges in the system and the need for reform. The National Audit Office report referenced in October 24 a projection that the national high needs block deficit will be between £4.3 billion and £4.9 billion by March 2026. As well as identifying the financial risks, these national reports also make it clear the system is not meeting the needs of children and young people. Outcomes are declining despite the huge growth in spend since the implementation of the 2014 Children and Families Act. The High Needs Block grant allocation for Durham in 24-25 was £93.8 million, an uplift of 4.3% on the previous year, which is well below the anticipated increased pressures created by growth in need and inflation. As a result, the budget for 24-25 was set with an anticipated deficit gap of around £6.5 million, and at Q3 the position has worsened further to a projected deficit in the budget for this financial year of around £13.2 million. The government recognised the pressure on High Needs Block in the autumn statement and announced an increase of 7.8% or £7.4 billion for 7.4 million pounds for Durham for 25-26. However, this will not fully address the expected shortfalls in funding for the next financial year or help with the current in-year or cumulative deficit. It is therefore expected that the Council's cumulative High Needs Block deficit will be around £38 million by the 31st of March 2026. The Government has put in place an accounting mechanism known as the statutory override to keep High Needs Block deficits separate from Council's general fund. However, that is currently due to end at March 26. Further details on the statutory override and its impact are covered in paragraphs 28 to 34 of the report. As mentioned earlier, it should also be noted that deficit arrangements do also have a direct impact on the Council's cash flow, leading to an estimated loss of interest of around £1 million in 24-25, rising to 1.5 million in 25-26. The Council has had in place for a considerable length of time a high needs block sustainability plan, with the first plan put in place in 2019 when the key risks to the system became apparent. A revised plan was agreed and implemented in 2023. Durham has also been part of a national programme delivering better value funded by the Department of Education, as well as a regional change programme partnership to align with planned national reforms. Strong governance is in place across the county, with the Send and Inclusion and Resources Board having oversight of a wide-ranging plan for local system change, which has been implemented with partners to mitigate the risks of growing levels of need and financial unsustainability. While these plans have been able to mitigate risk, we still urgently await national announcements on plans to reform the current system. Cabinet is asked to note the recommendations set out in paragraph 17 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, John. As the report is for noting, it doesn't require a proposer or seconder. However, can I invite Councillor Henderson, the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. We're aware of the regular budget monitoring and previous reports on the high needs block that there are increasing and serious financial pressures, which has been a demand and complexity continue to increase since the COVID. I wrote to the new Secretary of State about my concerns regarding this in the autumn of last year. And now this is a significant concern to all authorities up and down the country. This last report indicates that in the current financial year, our overspend has forecast to increase to over £13 million. Whilst the government did increase the grant available to us for the next year, our forecast shows that this is only covers 1/3 of our forecast budget pressure. So we'll leave a substantial gap in funding for 2025-26. The situation is unsustainable for us and other local authorities across the country. We need the government to take urgent action to reform the SEND system and make funding available for us to meet the needs of our children and young people. Whilst the financial situation is very concerning, I welcome the continued work of our SEND and Inclusion Resources Board and the programme of work underlined in the report. I recognise we will need to continue to monitor the situation with SEND, funding very carefully and seek to find ways to help mitigate some of the cost pressures we are currently facing. I also hope that the new government makes a clear statement about the future of SEND system and resources to local authorities soon. I would like to thank John Pearce and his team for the work that they continue to do to keep us in line. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ted. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay, can we agree the report? Can we note the report, sorry? Thank you. Okay. Item 8 is the County Durham Partnership Update. Can I invite Steve Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs, to present the report, please?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs. The overall message from the County Durham Partnership Update is there's yet again been a wide range of excellent work. The report's framed around the County Durham Partnership vision priorities, which are more and better jobs, people living longer and independent lives, and connected communities. The report sets out achievements since the last update to Cabinet in September 2024. Examples of some of the positive messages from the report are: in relation to rural issues, the County Durham Economic Partnership undertook a focused workshop looking at issues faced specifically by the rural community in relation to economic growth. These findings are now being applied to our economic plans. The Upper Teesdale Agricultural Support Services have been funded by Teesdale Area Action Partnership to provide an accessible minibus for residents and community groups in the area. The Poverty Action Steering Group's work continues to protect the most vulnerable communities. Initiatives focusing on the mitigation and impacts of food and fuel poverty, whilst ensuring access to welfare advice services and promoting financial inclusion. In fact, improved use of data processes have been utilised to pinpoint properties where residents are most likely to underclaim benefits. This has seen increases in applications, for example, in receipt of pension credit. In September, the Environment Climate Change Partnership agreed a new Environment Climate Change Action Plan. The third iteration of this plan was launched at a citizens' forum in Durham Town Hall on the 17th of October with over 100 attendees. The Safe Durham Partnership has been shortlisted for an Exemplary Partnership Award at the Antisocial Behaviour Awards. The nomination was largely for work related to bringing the community safety partnerships of Durham and Darlington together under one joint strategy. The Health and Wellbeing Board has issued a new County Durham Healthy Weight Action Plan. In support of the plan, the Council has formally committed to becoming a signatory of the Healthy Weight Declaration and will seek to influence partners to do the same. A celebratory event will take place at County Hall next week on the 18th of March. The Board also supported Making Suicide Everyone's Business conference on the 18th of February to raise awareness with professionals across the system and explore what more we can do to prevent future suicides in County Durham. A number of the area action partnerships have supported this initiative and projects related to it, including suicide intervention training and support groups. The report contains many, many more examples of the great work being undertaken across the partnership. With that, I ask Cabinet to note the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I was delighted to have the opportunity to speak at the County Durham Partnership annual event on the 6th of February. The theme of this year's event to consider how the County Durham Partnership can better support community action in 2025 and beyond. We heard from some fantastic community organisations who are making a real difference in the communities in which they're immersed. For example, Refuse, a social enterprise based in Chesley Street, who intercept and make use of food in the community which would otherwise be wasted. We also had an inspirational presentation from the chairperson of New Local, which is a think tank with a mission to transform public services and unlock community power. It is also great to read about the work of the Poverty Action Steering Group, including the continued impact of the Fun and Food programme and also the County Durham Poverty Truth Commission, which was launched yesterday. The Commission will provide a framework for engagement, bringing together people experiencing poverty with decision makers and organisational leaders to tell their stories and identify change that can make a difference to people's lives. I'm also pleased that Durham County Council, in partnership with Point North, supported community venues across the county to provide 75 welcome spaces where people can feel warm and comfortable and access refreshments. The annual County Durham Environment Awards took place on the 13th of February, supported by the Environment and Climate Change Partnership, to recognise the great work and commitment communities, organisations and individuals have towards caring for the natural and built environment across the county. 13 worthy winners were chosen from 45 submissions this year, including an outstanding award given at the discretion of expert judges to the Lanchester Group for displaying exemplary sustainability and environmentally friendly activity across multiple categories. The report also outlines the exceptional projects funded and supported by our AAPs, which are making a real difference in respect to local issues in local communities. There are examples such as enabling healthy weight for all through sports opportunities for young people and improving mental health and well-being through cultural arts-based initiatives. With that, I move that Cabinet note the content of the report. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the report? Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The county's strong record of partnership working continues, not least in our localities, with some really positive work by our AAPs, as you've referenced. From April, our current 14 area action partnerships will be replaced by 12 local networks in a key milestone after a long period of discussion and consultation to enhance the capacity of local communities and individuals to become involved by improving their area. The new local networks and the County Durham Community Network will allow strengthened existing partnership working to help identify and respond to any immediate challenges facing our communities. Local networks will meet for the first time after the local elections in May. I'm also thrilled to highlight the positive news in relation to our economy. An economic development review has been undertaken which shows that the economy has largely recovered from COVID-19. Between 2020 and 2022, the county's economy grew by more than 16% to 10.7 billion, and around 8,000 more residents are now in employment than before the inclusive economic strategy was adopted. I urge you to read about the ways that the Towns and Villages programme has been used to support a wide range of regeneration projects, as well as helping hundreds of new and existing businesses to thrive. With that, I endorse the Cabinet report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I'm talking about digital inclusion today, which I think is a real feather in our cap. We live in a world where everything is becoming increasingly digital, and whilst this can create a wealth of life opportunities, not everyone has the necessary high-speed connectivity, access to a device, digital skills, confidence, or indeed the motivation to actually get online. Access to technology is crucial for several reasons. It can have a huge negative impact on a person by limiting access to jobs, education, and access to services, as well as increasing the chance of poorer health outcomes and a lower life expectancy, increased loneliness, and social isolation. Experiencing digital exclusion can also negatively impact on your ability to manage your personal finances, acting as a barrier to banking online, accessing some benefit applications, or securing best online packages. Becoming digitally included can potentially lead to increased individual household and community resilience to poverty. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund has represented an opportunity to improve digital inclusion in some of the most deprived areas of the county. The intention being the programme can provide a level of digital access from which other council partner services and initiatives can then grow and be delivered from within communities themselves. The Digital Community Hubs programme has involved Digital Durham and technical services colleagues in digital services, as well as staff within regeneration, and aims to equip up to 26 community organisations which are located mainly in the 16 left behind areas and rural communities. And they will receive grant funding to supply subject to what the community actually needs, and includes the following: up to 12 digital devices, paid for connectivity with a 12 to 18-month subscription which can be purchased up front, work to improve internal Wi-Fi to ensure connectivity reaches the necessary areas of the community building, a maintenance contract to provide IT support to the community organisations, any furniture that's required to facilitate an IT suite, and a small marketing budget to help promote the availability of the new digital facilities and programme to the local community, as well as the necessary skills to help digitally excluded residents get online. The grant value requested by an organisation depends on individual requirements, in line with the need of the community aspirations, and subject to the approval by the Technical Funding Board, overseen by Economic Development colleagues. Rural Design Centre and Economic Development colleagues identified the community organisations who would be potentially interested in the offer. And once a hub is set up, Digital Durham will work with each organisation in the following year to create a bespoke digital programme and facilitate the link to partners that will utilise the connected space. Digital Durham will also support hubs to develop communication and marketing plans to promote what their digital offer is to the local communities once it's available. Support will also be provided to help obtain and recruit digital volunteers, and Durham Community Action also have a UK SPF funding programme to provide brokerage and resources to develop digital volunteering opportunities. And as more public health related information moves online, the County Durham Together community champions could potentially help to promote local services, campaigns and health tips. Local colleges and Durham University students can offer supervised informal digital inclusion support with learning sessions, and this will provide the added benefit of them to give them some valuable work experience. The promotion of the available hubs will start in Q1 of 25-26, when the hubs start providing a digital programme with partners. This is a time-limited funded project. However, the team will be working with communities and hubs to identify further funding opportunities, and this may enable further organisations in the county to become digital community hubs and help support the sustainability of the existing ones. The UK SPF funding is also being used to support 600 residents becoming digitally included. Residents who participate in a 6-week digital skills course with Durham Learn, take place in one of the digital community hubs or the bread and butter things localities, will be gifted a tablet and a data SIM at the end of the course to continue their ability to get online at home. The Samsung tablet will be provided with a case that includes an inbuilt keyboard, creating greater flexibility of use, such as applying for jobs, support for education and learning, and better access to public services. Learners who qualify must have turned 19 years of age on or before the 31st of August 2024, lived in the UK for the last 3 years, but some exceptions apply and they are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. This pilot will provide learning and evidence to support future potential device gifting funding bids. And finally, Chair, I'd like to say that there are some things that money can't buy in the world full of technology. But the value of having a face-to-face screen time with your grandchild on the opposite side of the county, or the opposite side of the country, or indeed the opposite side of the world, really can't be quantified. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Susan. Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Chair. My comments today are going to be related to the issues regarding welfare and poverty and those affected by poverty and deprivation within County Durham. And I'm not going to mention in detail the homelessness or humanitarian issues, which are very worthy causes, but I am going to mention very briefly the pension credit take-up initiative. Currently, some 700 elderly residents, have been awarded and will be entitled to the pension credit. That doesn't include the direct contact with the DWP. That will realise about £4,000 per person per year, making a total of over £3,000 for County Durham, and obviously including their winter fuel allowance entitlement. I am going to briefly mention also about the financial inclusion officers who are based in 12 secondary schools, generating significant benefit take-up, and mention and extend the comments previously made about fun and food. Over 5,000 children, mainly free school meal children, taking on board some 37,000 places. I'm also going to mention about the Advice Alliance between Age UK, the Christian Partnership, East Durham Trust and Citizen Advice, who have supported over 1,000 residents, generating an income increase of £1 million and managing debt of over £2.3 million. Not forgetting also the free school meal auto-enrolment, generating to 2,500 primary and secondary school children, saving their households some £400 per year, generating an extra £1 million, and also referencing the £3.5 million worth of pupil premium. Also briefly mention that the Bread and Butter project, now servicing some 20 hubs across County Durham, providing the provision of low-cost surplus food. And also to mention, and not forgetting, the emphasis on the council tax reduction scheme, some £67 million, servicing our 20 million residents who are pensioners and 33,000 low-paid people in employment. But I would like to emphasise something which is very focal at the moment, and that is the government's initiative to try to reduce the emphasis on benefit reliance and also the young people, NEETs as they are called. Our project, through the Poverty Action Steering Group, was emphasised called the Workplace Project, providing young people good quality education and training and employment. And through the Poverty Action Steering Group, some £657,000 was awarded in June 2023. And that provides opportunities for students in years 10 and 12 in insight into work to enhance their skills and aptitudes. I need to mention that some 1,445 students that exceeded our original target have been engaged in that process. And that's justified an underspend of some £165,000. I'm sure Councillor Bell will be very pleased to hear that. But it has been proposed, and as the portfolio holder, I have agreed in principle, not forgetting about the emphasis on the financial difficulty that Durham finds itself, to provide an extra £64,000 from the welfare assistance benefit, which is currently set at £1.2 million, to extend this programme to July 2026. Durham have proactively and diligently addressed this concern to try and future-proof the poverty and deprivation issues in County Durham. And long may it continue, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alan. Councillor Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. How to follow this? We've heard from Councillor Shield and Councillor MacDonald about many of these amazing things that have been happening inside our community hubs. The funding that we provided for energy efficiency improvements in our community buildings has also been having a significant positive impact. Working with Durham Community Action, we have so far managed to improve 27 community buildings right across our county, including replacement windows, solar panels, LED lighting and new boilers. And these include, forgive me, I'm going to list them, All Saints Church, Newton Hall, Sacriston Colliery Cricket Club, Barnard Castle Cricket Club, School A Cliff Community Association, Southmore Golf Club, Barnard Castle Girl Guides, Bournemore Cricket Lawn Tennis and Football Club, Spennymoor Youth and Community Association, Copley Village Hall, St John's Community Hall, Cotherston Village Hall, St Mary's Barnard Castle, Craghead Development Trust, Tantoby Community Centre, the Dean Valley Community Partnership, the Witham, Edmund Byers Village Hall, Toft Hill and Etherley Community Association, Evenwood Parish Hall, Trimdham Grange Community Centre, Jubilee Fields, West Auckland Memorial, New Biggin and District Village Hall, Whitton Gilbert Community Association, Pelton Community Centre, YMCA Bishop Auckland and Rookhope Village Hall. And at least 8 other community buildings are set for improvements from our Community Buildings Energy Efficiency Project, and still more from Area Action Partnership and Neighbourhood Budget Funds. And many more on top of that have also had energy audits as part of this programme, which will help them to secure grants in the future. By making our community facilities more energy efficient, it is helping to make them more sustainable, not just environmentally, but also financially, ensuring that these important buildings stay open in communities right across the county. Our continued work in partnership with Durham Community Action and other voluntary sector organisations really is making a positive difference, and so I support and welcome this County Durham Partnership update. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. As Steve Evans mentioned, the Health and Wellbeing Board, on which I sit, as well as the Adult and Children's Services Portfolio Holders, Councillors Hood and Councillor Henderson, last September agreed a refresh of the County Durham Healthy Weight Action Plan, and that's a system-wide approach to guide action within communities and workplaces to support people to make healthier choices. Obesity and being overweight is a chronic condition and a major risk factor in many health conditions, and levels continue to rise across the county. That's a very good piece of work, which I'm hoping that the council and its partners on the board will follow through and yield dividends. And if it does nothing more, every time I go across to the shop for lunch, it does make me stop and think about what should I get the pasty and chips, or should I get the baked potato, if there are still any left. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Rawlinson, did you say your hand here?
Thank you, Chair. We have ambitious plans to deliver new high-quality housing which is accessible and meets the needs and aspirations of our residents. A new housing board has been established to act as a strategic housing partnership. Members of the Cabinet have joined a rural partnership to deliver affordable housing in the west of the county. Teesdale and Weardale were left out of the delivery of 500 new homes, new council house homes to be built by the last Labour administration. This Cabinet believes it is important for our rural community to survive and prosper with more affordable housing in our rural areas and enable people to remain in our villages. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Henderson.
Yes, Chair. I'd just like to say that in the recent past, the very recent past, we have now built 2 brand new schools. One is the most efficient as far as the energy use is concerned, and has brought about a complete change to the schools themselves. Plus, the Belmont School is now very, very much a community asset. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ted. Can I ask Cabinet to note the report, please? Thank you. Item 9 is the Air Quality Action Plan 2025 to 2030. Can I invite Alan Patrickson, Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks Cabinet approval to adopt a new air quality action plan for parts of Durham City. An air quality management area was declared for those parts of Durham City in 2011. The area broadly encompassed the route of the A690 through the city centre. It was extended in 2014 and then again in 2022, taking in the route as far as Stonebridge and also Church Street in the town centre. This designation was as a result of nitrogen dioxide in the atmosphere, resulting principally from traffic emissions exceeding air quality objective levels. An air quality action plan was first developed and adopted in 2016. Best practice and government guidance requires air quality action plans to be reviewed on a 5-yearly basis, so a review should have been undertaken in 2020. However, this was delayed by the COVID pandemic, lockdowns and consequential low traffic volumes within the city, which would have significantly skewed any analysis. The current analysis, which is shown in detail in the action plan, has shown that air quality monitoring in recent years have shown improvement across the air quality management area, even as traffic volumes have returned to more normal levels, with currently only a single air quality monitoring point exceeding the objective. Other points, however, still measure within 10% of the objective, which is a level that has been identified as a risk. As a result, the Air Quality Action Plan has been reviewed and a new set of actions have been developed. These are set out in Appendix 2 to the report. The Action Plan has been subject to public consultation as well as discussion at Scrutiny Committee. The resulting plan was submitted to DEFRA in December of 2024, and DEFRA have now confirmed that the plan has been approved as meeting statutory requirements. As a result, the plan is presented here today to Cabinet for formal adoption by the Council, with the recommendations being set out in paragraph 12.
Thanks, Alan. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the Air Quality Action Plan for those parts of Durham City where elevated levels of nitrogen dioxide, NO2, predominantly from road vehicles, have been identified to exceed national air quality objectives. There's some important context to this report which needs to be recognised, and that is that this is a relatively short stretch of highway through the city centre in Durham as the only air quality management area in our entire county. The air quality in County Durham is generally good and traffic congestion is low compared to many other parts of the county, albeit with some issues around the county at certain times of day. The move to low emission vehicles is an important part of our drive to maintaining good air quality and as a council we are playing our part with the transition to low and zero emission vehicles in our fleet, the provision of publicly accessible community vehicle charging points, and the expansion of active travel infrastructure. Clean air and a good environment and access to nature are all important factors for the health and well-being of our communities and remain priorities for this council. The council declared an air quality management area for parts of Durham City in 2011 and has been taking action and monitoring outcomes since. While the results were skewed by the huge reduction in traffic during the pandemic, we are now seeing that air quality under normal conditions is improving on a consistent basis. There are, however, still locations within the air quality management area that either exceed or are close to exceeding the national pollution thresholds, so we must remain active and cannot become complacent about the challenge. This is why we have developed this 23-point action plan, which, following extensive consultation, now has the seal of approval from DEFRA. Progress has already been made towards these actions, including extended facilities and increased provision of electric vehicle charging points at park and ride sites, as well as Sunday opening at Belmont and Sniperley, revised parking arrangements, improved emission standards in local buses with more to follow, environmental improvements at the bus station, including a green wall, improved passenger information to promote the use of the park and ride services and public transport, including emphasising that use of public transport helps to reduce air pollution, and the continuing promotion of active travel and alternative travel options and encouragement of behavioural change. I know personally how difficult the challenge of improving air quality can be, having been involved with the reviews with officers, and have seen how hard council officers work to get plans like this over the line, and I'm grateful for their efforts to continually push for improvement. The actions set out within the plan will help to reduce emissions and improve air quality further, and thereby contribute to protecting public health, and I'm therefore happy to recommend the plan to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Can I invite Councillor Alan Shield, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Equality and Inclusion, to second the report?
Thank you, Chair. Poor air quality is an environmental risk to public health. It is associated with adverse health impacts and particularly affects the most vulnerable in society: children, the elderly, and those with existing heart and lung conditions. It is imperative that we take whatever actions we can to keep our towns and cities clean and free-flowing. It's worth considering the experience of other councils, for whom I note it's been necessary to introduce more extreme measures to combat poor air quality, such as congestion charging, and to appreciate the need to act early and act well. I am reassured that our plan has been presented to DEFRA and has achieved that national level of approval. I too would like to acknowledge and thank officers for their continuing work in this area, but also to recognise and acknowledge the leadership of the portfolio holder, Councillor Wilkes, who is an enthusiastic and effective advocate on air quality issues, although he can be a little overbearing on specific environmental issues. Chair, I'm happy to second the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I notice you didn't mention his problem sometimes in getting his car charged either. Yeah. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay. Can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm that recommendations are agreed. Under item 10, there is no official business for this part of the meeting, but I would like to take this opportunity, as he is in the room, to say thank you and pay tribute to Oliver Sherratt, our Head of Environment, Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, who is retiring from Durham County Council in the next few months. I know you'd find that hard to believe, because I can't believe he's old enough to retire, but I don't think, well, I know I haven't been here at Durham County Council when Oliver hasn't been here. So he's going to be a huge miss. He's someone who is approachable, always available to members, either on the end of an email or the end of the phone, and is proactive and has very much the can-do nature, which as an authority we wish to run with. So on behalf of Cabinet and some other people may wish to speak, I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you for your years of dedication to County Durham, and I wish you all the best for a very long, healthy and happy retirement, and please don't be a stranger. And we cannot have anything to do with climate without Mr Wilkes wanting to have a word. So straight over to Mark. Thank you.
I mean, in fairness with Oliver, it's not just climate. With 8 people working under him, and then another 1,000, yeah, it's quite a big job that you've had, Oliver, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with you, not just as a cabinet member for the last 4 years, but going back for the last 17 years, I think it is. And I know there have been some times in recent years when you've probably pulled your hair out at some of the requests that I've made as part of our efforts to improve the council. And I can assure you that I'm a little thinner on top too since taking this role. Your diligence and work ethic really is an exemplar to others. I do wonder sometimes how many hours you really do, because you're clearly doing more than you're supposed to, Oliver. I hope you have a wonderful retirement and enjoy your trip to Japan. If you spot anything there that they do better than us, please do let me know so I can put some pressure on your replacement. It's been great to work with you. You're a cut above the rest, so I'll waste no more time and simply say thank you for all that you've done for this council and our county over the decades. Thank you, Oliver.
Thanks, Mark. Richard?
Thanks, Chair. I think I first met Oliver over in Barnard Castle just before we were going unitary, because not many people know this, but one of the highlights of my district career was leading a scrutiny review into waste collection and disposal at Teesdale. I remember proudly handing Oliver the report and said, there you go, we're going unitary, there you go, Oliver. And another stand-up memory for me was Terry Collins leaving Do, which was during COVID, where Oliver had composed a little song, because again, not many people may know this. Oliver's quite a good pianist and composed quite a good little leaving song for Terry. I mean, I think throughout all the years I've known him, I'd echo everything that's been said. Oliver's managed very well an area that's inherently challenging, because let's face it, collecting waste in all weathers, in a county as big and diverse as ours, is inherently challenging. Plus managing all the stuff that comes down from above, some of which is better than others, but again, inherently challenging. And I think Oliver's done an excellent job of that over the years. And yes, he'll be a big miss, Oliver, and thank you very much.
James, did I say your hand?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, it's been a pleasure to work with you, Oliver. We've had the same mind, really, on what needed to be done in my portfolio anyways. And as the Chair says, you don't look old enough to retire, but do enjoy it. Thank you.
Alan?
Oliver, I think you're too young. I don't think you should. I think you should shut the door and tell him you can't go. It has been a pleasure, and it's been somewhat trying at sometimes to try and appease our public. Grass cutting, emptying bins, and all of the other frustrations that come along following the windstorms. If I was to mention a specific item, which is very local for me and yourself, if I mentioned Ebchester Embankment, I'm surprised you've still got some hair left. My hair, unfortunately, has turned white, not grey. And that's when we're trying to appease people who have different views, and you can't always satisfy the indefensible, trying to resolve those problems. Thank you for your efforts, thank you for your diligence, thank you for your thoroughness, and thank you for your support. Live long and prosper, and enjoy your retirement. Thank you.
Yeah, Susan?
I can't say anything more than already been said, Oliver, but what I can say is you deserve a gold medal for working with that man for the last 4 years.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Right. Oliver, do you want to give your final words?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I presume you weren't pointing at Alan there. Thanks so much for the honour of attending this meeting, Chair, and for all of those really very kind words that people have made. My local government career has been a blast, and it's been all the more enjoyable for the enthusiasm, the teamwork and the friendships forged along the way, and that includes yourselves as elected members. There's loads I can sort of like recount, but a few highlights was Cleveland County. I remember sort of trying to do our best to rescue some great crested newts. At Hartlepool, I can remember having to survey a footpath with a flak jacket and two armed response team police with us because the farmer threatened to shoot us. So memories like that sort of stick. I impressed my daughters for the first time ever when I was at Easington, not through anything we'd actually done, but when it did come to it, it's like an awards. The person given the awards was that guy off Gavin and Tracy, and that certainly sort of impressed them. And it's been an absolute sort of delight here in the last sort of 16 years at County Durham. And indeed, throughout all of that time, whether or not it's success or the many challenges like Ebchester and various others, the one constant that has been the support from yourselves as elected members. Mark sort of said, and thank you, for us working very hard, but you as elected members, you work all hours, right the way through the weekend. I know from the emails that you get over there. Good, but you really do sort of care about the communities that you serve, and it's that sort of like that shared vision, that shared value has made my time here all the more enjoyable. So a big thank you to yourselves as elected members for the privilege of working for you. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Move on to item 11, which is the exclusion of the press and public. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to exclude?
Yes, I move that request, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second that.
Thank you.
Request, Chair.
Can I ask that the Cabinet agree the resolution? Okay, thank you.